Since you're living here for free, you'll pay rent by working as my maid, you useless old woman." The ceramic plate exploded against the kitchen cabinet, sauce spattering across my knees as I dropped down to clean it. That's when I heard those familiar military boots crossing the hardwood floor. David had heard every poisonous word his wife just spat at me. What happened next would expose months of carefully crafted lies. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're from. Trust me, you need to see how this manipulative snake finally got caught. But let me back up and tell you how a woman like me ended up on her knees, scrubbing food off the floor while a girl young enough to be my daughter stood over me like some twisted queen. I'm Margaret Foster, and at 63, I thought I had life figured out. Comfortable retirement, paid-off house in suburban Atlanta, decent health. Then Dr. Williams found something during my routine mammogram that changed everything. "The tumor is aggressive, but treatable with immediate surgery," he explained. "However, your insurance has significant gaps. We're looking at about $87,000 out of pocket." My life savings was maybe $28,000. The math was simple and terrifying. My son David called from Fort Bragg that evening. At 38, he was a career Army officer, practical, decisive, and thankfully generous in a crisis. "Mom, we're selling the house. Use the money for surgery and recovery. Jennifer and I already discussed it. You're moving in with us while you get back on your feet." "David, I can't disrupt your lives." "You're not. We want you close. After losing Dad, the thought of you going through this alone," his voice caught. "I won't risk it." His wife Jennifer got on the extension. "We're so excited to have you here, Mom Foster. This will be perfect timing, actually." The house sold within 3 weeks. After medical expenses, I had $19,000 left, enough to eventually rent a small apartment once I recovered and found work, but not enough for immediate independence. Here's where things get interesting. David and Jennifer had been renting a small townhouse, but with my recovery needs, they decided to buy a proper house with space for all of us. David used my remaining money as the down payment and put the deed in my name for tax purposes. Something about protecting my assets, he said. "This way the house is yours, Mom, but we'll all live here together as family," David explained. "When you're fully recovered, if you want your own place, we can sell and split the proceeds." Jennifer smiled warmly. "Though honestly, we hope you'll want to stay. It's nice having family close." The basement was converted into my recovery suite with medical-grade bathroom fixtures, a small kitchenette, and separate entrance. Professional work that David arranged while I was still in the hospital. The first 6 weeks were genuinely wonderful. Jennifer drove me to appointments, made homemade soup when I was exhausted, and we'd watch old movies together. I started thinking this arrangement was a blessing in disguise. "Jennifer's been an absolute angel," I told David during one of our video calls. "I don't know what I would have done without her." "She adores you," David replied. "She told me yesterday that having you here has been the highlight of this whole year." But the week before David deployed to Germany for 6 months, something shifted. Jennifer became distant, less available, slightly impatient with my questions. I watched from my window as she waved goodbye to David, playing the perfect military wife. The moment his car disappeared, she turned and looked directly at me. For just a second, I saw something cold and hungry in her expression. Then she smiled and waved, but the warmth never reached her eyes. 2 days later, the caring daughter-in-law I'd been living with vanished entirely. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Jennifer was too smart for that. It started with tiny boundary violations that seemed almost accidental. 3 days after David left, she walked into my space without knocking while I was getting dressed. No warning, just pushed open the door like she owned the place. "Oh, sorry," she said, but didn't look away or step back. "I was bringing your mail. Maybe knock next time?" I suggested, pulling my robe closed. "Of course, though this is all one household now." She paused deliberately. "But you're right. Privacy is important for house guests." House guests. Fascinating word choice from someone who'd been calling this our family home for weeks. The next morning, a typed note appeared under my door. "Morning noise carries more than expected. Please keep activities before 9 a.m. to absolute minimum. Thanks, Jay." I read it twice. I made coffee quietly, walked softly, barely used the small television, but apparently, existing before Jennifer's preferred wake-up time was problematic. That evening, she appeared with a casserole dish. "Made extra tuna casserole for dinner," she announced brightly. The smell hit immediately, overwhelming onion, which she knew I couldn't eat due to acid reflux. I'd mentioned it multiple times during recovery. "That's thoughtful, but onions really don't agree with me." "Oh, right, totally forgot." She snapped her fingers theatrically. "My mistake. Guess you'll need to figure out dinner on your own tonight." Figure out dinner on your own. Like I was a failing roommate who hadn't contributed to groceries. Here's what Jennifer underestimated. I might have been recovering from surgery, but I wasn't recovering from 63 years of reading people. I'd navigated workplace politics, raised a son through difficult teens, managed household budgets through recessions. I recognized manipulation when I saw it. The question was whether this was conscious testing or Jennifer's true personality emerging without her audience. That night, I climbed upstairs for what I thought would be our usual shared dinner. "Oh," Jennifer looked up with apparent surprise. "I only made enough for myself tonight. Figured you'd want to eat in your own space since you have that nice kitchenette." My own space. A hot plate and mini fridge hardly constituted independent cooking facilities. "I could make something simple up here," I offered. "Actually, I'm expecting a call from my sister. Might get emotional. Family drama, you know?" She made a sympathetic face. "Would you mind giving me privacy tonight?" As I carried a peanut butter sandwich back downstairs, I heard Jennifer on the phone, not with any sister, but with someone named Ashley, laughing about how she was finally getting the house back to herself. I sat in my small space, eating my makeshift dinner, and realized I was watching a deliberate campaign begin. Jennifer wasn't just thoughtless, she was strategic. But if Jennifer thought I'd simply accept whatever treatment she decided to dish out, she'd seriously underestimated Margaret Foster. I started a notebook that very night, recording dates, times, and exact quotes. Not because I was planning anything specific, but because I needed to understand the game we were playing. And more importantly, I needed to figure out how to win it, because something told me this was just the beginning. By week 4 of David's deployment, Jennifer had refined her approach into something almost artistic in its cruelty. She'd started hosting weekly girls' nights every Thursday, which meant I needed to avoid the main floor to give the ladies privacy. Through the heating vents, I could hear her entertaining friends with stories about her challenging living situation. "It's heartbreaking watching families struggle after medical trauma," she told someone with perfect blend of concern and martyrdom. "The personality changes can be so difficult to manage." I nearly choked. Personality changes? I was the same person I'd always been. "She's become so dependent since the surgery," Jennifer continued, "constantly asking me to do things for her, then getting upset when I don't do them exactly right. Yesterday, she actually criticized how I folded her laundry. I had mentioned that fabric softener made my skin itch, a medical fact, not a personal preference. But Jennifer was spinning it into evidence of unreasonable demands. Instead of confronting her directly, I decided to gather ammunition. I started documenting everything in detail, recording her phone conversations when possible, photographing evidence, keeping meticulous notes. The next morning, she knocked once and entered before I could respond. "Good morning, Mom Foster," she said, but the warmth had completely drained from the nickname. "I've been thinking about how to make this living arrangement more sustainable." She handed me a printed sheet titled Household Contribution Expectations. Deep cleaning all bathrooms weekly. Kitchen floors daily. All household laundry including delicates. Complete grocery shopping and meal preparation. Window washing, interior and exterior. "Jennifer, this is quite extensive. Some tasks might still be too strenuous." "Strenuous? You've been cleared for normal activity for over 2 months." Her voice carried an edge now. "I thought you'd appreciate the chance to contribute meaningfully." "Of course I want to help, but this seems like—" "David works incredibly hard to support this household," she interrupted. "And I've been managing everything else while also caring for you. This just balances things fairly." The phrase caring for you nearly made me laugh. If serving me inedible food and banishing me to the basement constituted care, Jennifer had a fascinating definition of the term. "I understand," I said quietly, but I was already planning my next move. That afternoon, while scrubbing her bathtub, I called my old church from my cell phone. "Pastor Williams? This is Margaret Foster. I need some guidance about resources for older adults in difficult family situations. Mrs. Foster, what you're describing sounds concerning. Have you heard of Adult Protective Services? I hadn't, but I was about to learn. There are also legal aid services specifically for seniors, he continued, and temporary housing options if you need to remove yourself from an unsafe situation. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had options beyond simply enduring Jennifer's campaign. That evening, I made two important decisions. First, I would start building a case just as methodically as Jennifer was building hers. Second, I would reach out to David more assertively instead of waiting for his scheduled calls. If Jennifer wanted to play games with an old woman, she was about to discover that this old woman had learned a few tricks during her 63 years on Earth, and I was just getting started. 3 weeks into Jennifer's contribution schedule, I made a discovery that changed everything about how I understood what I was dealing with. While cleaning Jennifer's bedroom, one of my assigned tasks, I found a draft email tucked inside a book on her nightstand. The subject line made my blood freeze. Urgent consultation needed. Concerning behavioral changes. The email was addressed to Dr. Patricia Hendricks, geriatric specialist. I'm seeking urgent consultation regarding my mother-in-law's alarming behavioral changes since her surgery. She's exhibited increasing paranoia, claiming I treat her poorly when I've shown nothing but care. She frequently seems confused about our conversations and has begun misplacing items, then accusing me of hiding them. Every word was a lie, but crafted with professional language. Jennifer had researched exactly how doctors assess cognitive decline. I photographed the draft immediately, my hands trembling. This wasn't random cruelty. This was a blueprint for having me declared mentally incompetent. But Jennifer's real mistake was getting overconfident. That evening, I heard her on the phone with someone, speaking louder than usual. Dr. Hendricks? This is Jennifer Coleman. I need to schedule an urgent evaluation. Yes, my mother-in-law's condition has deteriorated significantly. I need professional documentation of her declining judgment. I managed to record most of the conversation on my phone, including Jennifer saying, I need something in writing that shows she can't make sound decisions about her living situation anymore. This time, I successfully emailed the audio file to David's personal account with a clear subject line, Urgent, listen to this recording. 2 days later, David called for our regular video chat. Jennifer appeared within moments, settling beside me with her practiced smile, but something felt different in the air. There are my favorite ladies, David said, but his voice seemed more careful than usual. We're doing well, Jennifer replied smoothly, though your mom seemed confused yesterday about her appointment schedule. Didn't you, Mom Foster? I had no appointments scheduled, but before I could respond, David spoke. Actually, Mom sent me something interesting recently, an audio recording. Jennifer went completely still. I'm not sure what that would be about, she said, but tension crept into her voice. It was a recording of you talking to a doctor about having my mother evaluated for cognitive decline. You specifically asked for documentation that she can't make sound decisions. Want to explain that? The silence stretched endlessly. David, I can explain, Jennifer finally said. Your mother has been having episodes, and I was just exploring options to help. What episodes? Be specific. She gets confused about things, forgets conversations, makes accusations. Jennifer was speaking faster now, clearly improvising. I was just trying to get professional guidance. Mom, David interrupted, looking directly at me. Are you confused about things? Are you forgetting conversations? No, I said clearly. I'm not confused about anything. But I am concerned about being secretly scheduled for psychiatric evaluations based on fabricated symptoms. Jennifer's face flushed. David, you don't understand what it's been like. Jennifer. David's voice went dangerously quiet. I want you to stop talking now. After the call ended, Jennifer turned to me with undisguised fury. You recorded my private conversation. You violated my privacy. You were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent based on lies. You are paranoid and delusional. That call proves it. No, I said calmly. That call proves you're dangerous. But what Jennifer didn't realize was that she'd just made the crucial error that would ultimately destroy her. She'd shown her true intentions directly to David, and my son was much smarter than she'd given him credit for. After my recorded phone call reached David, Jennifer's approach shifted from subtle manipulation to open warfare. "I've made an appointment for you," she announced the next morning, brandishing a printed confirmation. "Dr. Patricia Hendricks, geriatric psychiatrist, Monday at 2 p.m. I don't need to see a psychiatrist." "I think you do. Your recent behavior, secretly recording private conversations, making paranoid accusations, suggests you need professional evaluation. Jennifer, you can't force me to see any doctor. Actually, as your primary caregiver while David's deployed, I absolutely can advocate for necessary medical intervention." Her smile was razor sharp, especially when someone shows declining judgment and reality distortion. She was twisting everything. My reasonable self-defense was being reframed as evidence of mental instability. "I won't go. Then I'll call David and explain that you've become completely uncooperative about your health care. How do you think that conversation will go?" Instead of arguing further, I made a decision that surprised even me. "You know what, Jennifer? Make that call right now. Let's get David on the line and discuss my mental health together." Her confidence flickered for just a moment. "I don't think that's necessary." "I do. Call him, right now. Tell him I'm refusing medical care and acting paranoid. Let's see what he says." Jennifer stared at me, realizing I'd just called her bluff. That afternoon, while she was at yoga, I took action on multiple fronts. First, I called Adult Protective Services and reported what was happening. "Ma'am, what you're describing constitutes elder abuse," the caseworker said. "We can open an investigation immediately." Second, I called David directly on his personal line. "Mom, is everything okay?" "David, Jennifer is trying to force me into a psychiatric evaluation with a doctor. She's already primed with false information about my mental state. I need you to know that I am completely mentally sound, and I will not submit to this." "She scheduled you for what?" "A psychiatric evaluation. She claims she can force me because she's my primary caregiver." "Mom, she's not your legal guardian. She has zero authority over your medical decisions." "She says she does. She's lying." "Mom, listen carefully. You have the absolute right to refuse any medical treatment. Jennifer has no legal power over you whatsoever." Relief flooded through me. "David, there's more. I've been documenting everything she's said and done for weeks. I have recordings, photographs, detailed notes with dates and times. Send me everything you have. Every single piece of evidence." "What are you going to do?" "I'm coming home early. Family emergency leave got approved." "When?" "I'll be there Wednesday afternoon." "Mom, until then, be very careful. Don't let her isolate you or control your communications with anyone else." After we hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine hope. Jennifer thought she was backing me into a corner, but what she'd actually done was force me to find my strength and fight back. Wednesday was only 5 days away. I just needed to survive until then without letting Jennifer realize her perfect plan was about to collapse completely. But Jennifer wasn't finished with me yet. The weekend before David's return, Jennifer's behavior became increasingly erratic and vindictive, like someone who sensed their control slipping away. Saturday morning, I found all my clothes dumped in garbage bags by the washing machine. "Thought you might want to wash everything," Jennifer explained with false innocence. "Some of your things smelled a bit musty downstairs." Nothing had smelled musty. She was forcing me to rewash my entire wardrobe just to demonstrate her power. Sunday, she served me dinner so oversalted it was nearly inedible, then expressed concern when I couldn't finish it. "You've been eating so little lately." "I'm worried about unhealthy weight loss." Every interaction was designed to create evidence of my decline that she could report to anyone who asked. But Monday morning, Jennifer made the mistake that would seal her fate forever. She was on the phone with someone, probably one of her friends, and didn't realize how clearly her voice carried through the house. "The crazy old bat is finally starting to crack," she said, with obvious satisfaction. "David's going to be shocked when he sees how far she's declined. I've got enough documentation to prove she needs full-time institutional care." I grabbed my phone and recorded the entire conversation, including Jennifer saying, "By Thursday, David will be begging me to help him find a good nursing home." Problem solved. That afternoon, Jennifer announced she was leaving for an overnight trip to visit her mother. "Last chance for some peace before David gets back and disrupts everything," she said with false sweetness. The moment her car left the driveway, I acted decisively. I called Pastor Williams. I need to stay at the church guest house tonight. I need to be somewhere safe while I prepare for my son's return. Of course, Mrs. Foster. Come right over. I packed a bag with my documentation, phone recordings, and photographs of Jennifer's fake emails. Then I called David. Mom, what's wrong? I'm leaving the house tonight. I'm going to stay at my church until you get home tomorrow. Did something happen? She's escalating rapidly, David. And I have new recordings of her admitting she's building a case to have me institutionalized by Thursday. Jesus. Mom, are you safe right now? Yes, she's gone until tomorrow. But David, when she realizes I'm not here, she's going to panic and probably call you with some dramatic story about me being missing or confused. Let her try. Mom, when I get home tomorrow, we're ending this permanently. That night, sleeping peacefully in the comfortable church guest room, I felt genuine serenity for the first time in months. No walking on eggshells, no psychological manipulation, no constant vigilance. But I also knew Jennifer's reaction to finding me gone would be swift and desperate. She'd realize her timeline was collapsing and resort to increasingly dangerous tactics. Tuesday morning, my phone started ringing at 6 a.m. sharp. Jennifer had discovered I was missing, and she was about to play her most desperate card yet. The question was whether David would see through it, or if her months of manipulation would finally pay off. Jennifer's first call came at exactly 6:03 a.m. Margaret? Margaret, where are you? I came home and you're nowhere to be found. Her voice was perfectly calibrated, concerned, slightly panicked, like a devoted caregiver discovering her confused charge had wandered off. I'm perfectly safe, Jennifer. Safe? What do you mean safe? Where are you? Are you confused about where you live? Even now, she was trying to paint me as disoriented. I'm staying elsewhere until David gets home this afternoon. Margaret, this is exactly the kind of concerning behavior I've been trying to address. You can't just disappear without telling anyone. What if you'd had a medical emergency? What if you'd gotten lost? She was building her narrative in real time, but I wasn't playing along anymore. Jennifer, I have recordings of you planning to have me institutionalized by Thursday. This conversation is over. I hung up. The phone immediately rang again. I didn't answer. 20 minutes later, 20. David texted, Jennifer called saying you disappeared overnight, and she's worried about your mental state. Are you okay? I texted back, completely fine. At church guest house, have new recordings of her admitting everything. Don't believe anything she tells you. At 8 a.m., Jennifer called David directly. I know because he called me immediately afterward. Mom, Jennifer's claiming you left a note saying you couldn't take it anymore and that she's terrified you might harm yourself. David, that's complete fiction. I left no note of any kind. I told her exactly where I was going and why. I figured as much. But Mom, she's threatening to call police and report you as a missing person with dementia. Can she do that? She can try. But when police find you safe and coherent at your church, her credibility is going to take a major hit. At 10:30 a.m., Pastor Williams knocked on my door. Mrs. Foster? Police are here. They received a missing person report about an elderly woman with possible cognitive impairment. I smiled grimly. Jennifer had overplayed her hand spectacularly. I met with Officers Rodriguez and Chen in the church lobby. They were professional, but clearly skeptical of the report they'd received. Ma'am, we're responding to a missing person report filed by your daughter-in-law. She claims you left home overnight and may be experiencing confusion. Officers, I'm not missing, confused, or impaired in any way. I left my son's house temporarily due to ongoing harassment from his wife, and I'm staying here until he returns from deployment this afternoon. You seem completely lucid and oriented to us, Officer Rodriguez observed. Can you tell us why your daughter-in-law might think you were missing? Because she's been building a false narrative about my mental decline to have me institutionalized. When I left voluntarily, it ruined her story. The officers exchanged meaningful glances. Ma'am, what you're describing could constitute elder abuse, Officer Chen said gently. Are you interested in filing a report? Not yet. My son is handling the situation when he arrives this afternoon, but thank you for knowing that's an option. After the police left, I called David with an update. She actually called the police, he said, barely controlled fury in his voice. She reported you as missing with dementia. The officers saw right through it immediately. Good. Mom, I land at 3 p.m. Meet me at the house at 4. It's time Jennifer and I had a conversation she'll never forget. David, what are you planning? Justice, he said simply. That night, I slept better than I had in months, knowing that tomorrow would bring the reckoning Jennifer had been working so hard to avoid. Wednesday at 3:45 p.m., I stood on the front porch of the house that legally belonged to me, holding my key, but hesitating. 6 months ago, this had been my refuge. Today, it felt like walking into a battlefield. David's rental car pulled into the driveway as I gathered my courage. He looked exhausted from travel but determined in a way that reminded me of his father, quiet, focused, and absolutely immovable when he'd made a decision. You ready for this, Mom? I've been ready for months. We walked into the house together. Jennifer appeared from the kitchen immediately, her face a perfect mask of relief and concern. Margaret, thank God you're safe. I was so worried when you disappeared like that. Stop, David said quietly. David! Jennifer's performance shifted seamlessly to devoted wife. I'm so glad you're here. I didn't know what to do when your mom just vanished. I said, stop talking. Something in David's tone penetrated Jennifer's confidence. She finally went quiet. Jennifer, sit down, David continued, gesturing to the living room. We need to have a conversation. We all sat, tension thick enough to cut. David pulled out his phone. I'm going to play some audio recordings my mother sent me. He played the first recording. Jennifer on the phone with Dr. Hendricks, requesting professional documentation of my incompetence. Jennifer's face paled, but she rallied quickly. David, I was just trying to get professional help for your mother. David played the second recording, Jennifer laughing about the crazy old bat finally cracking and having me institutionalized by Thursday. This time Jennifer had no immediate response. These recordings span several weeks, David continued calmly. They document a deliberate campaign to fabricate evidence of cognitive decline. David, you don't understand what it's been like living with her. Actually, I do understand. Because I also spent the last week verifying every story you told me about Mom's behavior. David pulled out a thick folder. I called her doctor. She's in perfect health. I spoke with grocery store managers. They remember her as a pleasant, coherent customer. I even talked to the Uber drivers who've taken her places. They all described her as sharp and oriented. Jennifer stared at the folder like it contained a bomb. Every single incident you reported to me about Mom's confusion or inappropriate behavior, I found evidence proving it never happened. You're taking her word over mine? I'm your wife. You were my wife, David corrected quietly. Past tense. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. David, please, here's what's going to happen. You have 2 hours to pack your personal belongings and leave this house permanently. You can't kick me out. This is my home too. No, it's not. This house belongs to my mother. I used her money to purchase it and put the deed in her name. You've been living here as a guest, and that invitation is permanently revoked. Jennifer looked between us, desperation replacing her usual confidence. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care, David said simply. As I watched Jennifer's world crumble around her, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Complete vindication. Jennifer cycled through every manipulation tactic in her arsenal, but none of them worked on David anymore. You're really going to believe her over me? She asked, crocodile tears starting to flow. David, she's been having episodes, real episodes. She gets confused and then fabricates stories to explain her confusion. Like the episode where you called Dr. Hendricks asking for documentation of her incompetence? David replied calmly. I was trying to get her help. Or the episode where you told someone she was finally cracking and you'd have her institutionalized by Thursday. Jennifer's tears stopped abruptly. This is all her fault, Jennifer snarled, pointing at me. She turned you against me. She's manipulative and jealous because she can't stand that you chose me. Mom didn't turn me against anyone, David said. You did that yourself. I never lied to you. David opened his folder again. Really? Because I have detailed notes of every conversation we've had about Mom's supposed episodes, and I spent this week fact-checking every single story. Jennifer went silent. You told me she seemed confused at the grocery store. The manager remembers her as one of their most polite customers. You said she got lost in an Uber. The driver said she gave perfect directions and tipped generously. I watched Jennifer's face cycle through emotions. Anger, fear, desperation, and finally, cold fury. "Fine," she said suddenly. "You want to choose your mommy over your wife? Go ahead, but this isn't over. I'll be back with a lawyer." She stood up and smoothed her shirt with forced dignity. "This house was our marital home. I have rights to half of everything here." David smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. "Actually, Jennifer, you might want to check the timeline. This house was purchased with money from the sale of Mom's previous home and placed in her name before we were even engaged. It was never marital property." Jennifer's confident facade cracked completely. "That's impossible. You never told me." "I never told you a lot of things. Like the fact that I've suspected something was wrong for months. Like the fact that I moved most of our joint savings into a separate account before deployment. You can't do that. Already did. The account you have access to contains enough for maybe 6 weeks of expenses. After that, you'll need to figure out your own situation." Jennifer stared at David like she was seeing him for the first time. "You planned this. You've been planning to leave me." "No," David said quietly. "I was hoping I was wrong about you. I was hoping I'd come back and find out Mom really was having problems and you were genuinely trying to help." He walked to the front door and opened it wide. "But instead, I found out my wife spent 6 months psychologically torturing my mother in her own home. So you have 2 hours to pack and leave." Jennifer looked around the living room one last time, then fixed me with pure hatred. "This is all your fault, you vindictive old witch." "No," I said calmly. "This is all your fault. I just survived it." 1 hour and 43 minutes later, we watched Jennifer load her belongings into her car. She didn't say goodbye, just drove away like the house had never meant anything to her. Maybe it hadn't. Maybe Jennifer had only ever seen it as a stage for her performance. But as her taillights disappeared, I realized something had fundamentally changed in me over the past 6 months. I was stronger now, more confident, less willing to accept treatment that diminished my dignity. Jennifer had tried to break me, but instead, she'd taught me exactly how resilient I really was. The divorce took 14 months, longer than I'd hoped, but Jennifer fought for everything she could get. She hired an aggressive attorney and claimed spousal support, half the household furnishings, and even argued for partial ownership of my personal belongings. She's claiming she provided unpaid caregiving services that should be compensated, David's lawyer explained. She's also alleging emotional distress from false accusations of abuse. Even in divorce court, Jennifer tried to rewrite history and paint herself as the victim, but David had prepared thoroughly. When Jennifer's lawyer presented her evidence of my mental decline, David's attorney countered with medical records proving my cognitive fitness, signed statements from grocery store employees about my normal behavior, and detailed documentation of her fabricated incidents. Most damaging were Jennifer's own recorded admissions, the phone calls where she openly discussed building a case for my institutionalization. "Your Honor," David's attorney argued, "Mrs. Coleman's claims of providing necessary care are contradicted by her own words, admitting she fabricated evidence of decline. This wasn't caregiving, this was elder abuse." The judge was clearly unimpressed with Jennifer's case. In the final settlement, Jennifer received no spousal support, no claim on the house, and only personal belongings she'd brought to the marriage. She was also ordered to pay half of David's legal fees. Most importantly, the court issued a restraining order prohibiting Jennifer from coming within 300 feet of me or the house. "How do you feel?" David asked as we left the courthouse. "Free," I said simply. David took extended leave to help me fully reclaim my home and my life. We redecorated rooms, planted a garden, and slowly transformed the house into a place of peace again. I found part-time work doing bookkeeping for a local nonprofit, work that gave me purpose and financial independence. David was reassigned to Fort Gordon in Georgia, close enough for regular visits, but far enough that we both maintained our autonomy. Most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts again. Jennifer had spent months making me question my perceptions and doubt my reality. Recovery from that kind of manipulation takes time, but every day I felt more confident in my own judgment. A year after the divorce was finalized, I was working in my garden when I noticed a car driving slowly past the house. Jennifer, looking older and worn down, staring at the home she'd lost through her own choices. I felt a brief moment of something, not pity exactly, but sadness for the waste of it all. Then I went back to my roses. They needed attention, and this was my garden now. 3 months later, I heard through acquaintances that Jennifer had moved to Florida and remarried quickly, a retired businessman she'd met online. I hoped, for his sake, that she'd learned something from the consequences of her behavior, but I doubted it. People like Jennifer rarely change. They just find new targets. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I had my home, my peace, my relationship with my son, and my hard-earned knowledge of exactly how strong I could be when I needed to be. Sometimes that's all the victory anyone needs. 2 years after Jennifer's final exit from my life, I was volunteering at the senior center when I spotted her across the room at a community event. She looked different, thinner, more brittle, with the kind of tension that comes from always being on guard. When she saw me, I could see her debating whether to approach or leave immediately. She chose to approach. "Margaret," she said carefully, testing whether my name might explode in her mouth. "Hello, Jennifer. You look well." She seemed genuinely surprised by this. "I am well, thank you." She glanced around nervously, then leaned slightly closer. "Look, I know things got complicated between us back then, but I hope you understand I was under tremendous stress. Sometimes people say things they don't mean when they're overwhelmed." I looked at her for a long moment. She was still trying to rewrite history, turning 6 months of calculated psychological abuse into stress-induced poor judgment. "Jennifer, I hope you found happiness in your life." It was all I was willing to give her. No forgiveness, no shared responsibility for what happened, no validation of her attempt to minimize her actions. Her face showed disappointment, as if she'd hoped for something more. Perhaps mutual acknowledgement of mistakes, or agreement to forget the past. But some things shouldn't be forgotten or minimized. "Well," she said finally, "I suppose I should let you get back to your volunteering. Take care of yourself, Jennifer." I walked away without looking back, just as I'd done the day she left my house. That evening, I told David about the encounter. "How did it feel seeing her again?" he asked. "Anticlimactic," I said honestly. "She seemed smaller somehow, less threatening." "That's because she has no power over you anymore. She probably expected you to still be afraid or angry or something she could manipulate. But I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not even angry." And that was true. The fear Jennifer had cultivated so carefully had evaporated when the truth came out. The anger I'd carried had faded too, replaced by something more valuable. Complete confidence in my ability to recognize manipulation and protect myself from it. "You know what the best part is?" I told him. "I'm not the same person she tried to destroy. I'm stronger, more aware, less willing to accept poor treatment from anyone." 6 months later, I started leading a support group for seniors who'd experienced abuse. My experience with Jennifer gave me insight into how psychological manipulation works and how to fight back. The most important thing, I tell people in my groups, is to trust your own perceptions. If someone is making you feel confused about reality, that's not an accident. That's a strategy. Some people I work with have suffered worse abuse than I did, but all have that same look I remember from my darkest days, the look of someone who's been made to doubt their own sanity. My job is helping them remember they're not crazy, not imagining things, and they deserve dignity and respect. It's work I wish someone had been doing for me during those awful months. Since no one was, I'm doing it for others now. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below. Because here's what I learned. Surviving psychological abuse doesn't just make you a victim. It can make you a warrior for others who need someone to believe them and remind them of their worth. Hours before that final confrontation, I was the one with nowhere to go, living at the mercy of someone who saw me as an inconvenience to eliminate. Today, Jennifer knows exactly how that feels. But the difference is, I never tried to destroy someone else to get what I wanted. I just refused to let someone destroy me. And sometimes, that's all the justice the world requires. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.